Do you know what is quietly happening inside your mind right now, while you are listening to this? Not the thoughts you are aware of, not the images drifting through the edges of your attention, not the soft sounds around you, or the feeling of your body settling into stillness. Something else, something much deeper and much quieter than any of that. Something that has been happening every single moment of your life, and yet you have almost certainly never stopped to look directly at it. Right now, beneath every thought, beneath every sensation, beneath the gentle weight of exhaustion pulling you towards sleep, there is something watching, something noticing, something that is aware of the darkness behind your closed eyes, aware of the rhythm of your breathing, aware even of the very act of awareness itself. And here is the strange part. That something has no name. It cannot be pointed to. It cannot be defined or measured or held. And yet it is the most intimate thing in your existence. More intimate than your own heartbeat. More intimate than your own name. It is the ground upon which everything else in your experience has ever appeared and will ever appear. Welcome to the channel Thoughts of Alan Watts. And tonight, together, in the soft and quiet hours before sleep, we are going to explore something that very few people ever pause long enough to discover. We are going to explore the secret of reality. Not reality as science describes it, not reality as religion defines it, not reality as your culture has trained you to understand it, but reality as it actually is, right now, in this very moment, as you listen to these words and feel the world growing quieter around you. There is a strange habit that the human mind has developed over thousands of years of civilization. It is the habit of mistaking the map for the territory, of mistaking the description of the world for the world itself, of mistaking the word for the thing the word points to. You have a name, and that name has followed you everywhere your entire life. People have called you by it since before you could understand what language was. And somewhere along the way, very quietly, without anyone ever pointing it out to you, you began to believe that you were that name, that the word and the being were the same thing, that the label and the living reality it was attached to were one and the same. But think about this for a moment. The word water does not make you wet. The word fire does not burn your fingers. The word ocean does not carry the salt smell of the sea or the cold pull of the waves around your ankles. Words are maps. They are useful. They are extraordinary inventions, and without them you could not do most of the things that fill your days. But they are not the thing itself. And when you forget this, when you confuse the map for the territory, something very peculiar begins to happen to your experience of being alive. You begin to feel as though life is somehow separate from you, as though you are watching it from behind glass, as though there is the world out there, and then there is you in here, somehow apart from it, somehow excluded from the great unfolding of everything. Alan Watts spent the better part of his remarkable life trying to point people back toward the territory, trying to dissolve the confusion between the symbol and the thing symbolized, trying to help people see that the feeling of separation, the feeling of being a small and isolated self, floating in an enormous and indifferent universe, is not a fact. It is a habit of perception. It is something that happens when you think about life rather than living it. When you narrate your experience rather than simply having it.
And tonight, as the world quiets down around you, as the day releases its grip on your attention, and sleep begins to gather at the edges of your awareness, we are going to follow that thread. We are going to follow it all the way down into the deepest and most luminous place it leads. Because the secret of reality, when you finally touch it, does not make you feel small. It does not make you feel frightened or overwhelmed. It makes you feel something else entirely. Something that is very difficult to put into words, but which your body already knows. A kind of coming home, a kind of relaxation so deep that it goes all the way down through your muscles and your bones and your thoughts, and even through the very sense that there is a you here at all. Let us begin at the beginning, or rather, let us begin at what appears to be the beginning, because one of the things we will discover tonight is that the universe does not really have a beginning in the way that we usually imagine it does. But we will start where you are right now, here, in this moment, in this body, in this room, wherever you are as you listen to these words. You are lying down or sitting, or perhaps somewhere in between. Your eyes are closed or nearly closed. The sounds of the day have grown softer. The demands of your life have receded for now. And in this quiet, if you pay very close attention, you can notice something that is always present, but almost never noticed. You can notice that there is a quality of silence underneath everything. Not the absence of sound, because there are sounds around you right now. The soft background noise of the world, continuing its business. The sound of your own breathing. The faint and indefinable hum of existence. Not the absence of sound, but something deeper than sound. A quality of stillness that is not disturbed by the sounds that arise within it. Like the way the surface of a deep lake can be ruffled by the wind, while the depths remain absolutely still. That stillness, that silence underneath everything, that is not nothing. It is not emptiness in the hollow sense, not absence, not lack. It is more like the canvas on which the painting appears, more like the silence that makes music possible, because without silence there could be no music. Without gaps between the notes, there would be no melody, only noise. And without that deep background stillness, there would be no experience at all, only chaos. Very few people ever notice this. We are trained from the very beginning of our lives to pay attention to the figures and not the ground, to notice what is happening and not the space in which the happening occurs, to follow the movement and ignore the stillness from which the movement arises and to which it always returns. But that stillness is not passive. It is not dead. It is not simply the absence of everything interesting. It is, in a very real sense, the most alive thing there is. And Alan Watts, drawing on traditions both Eastern and Western, spent decades trying to find different ways to point people toward this recognition. Toward the recognition that what you are, most fundamentally, is not the figure, but the ground. Not the wave, but the ocean. Not the individual note, but the music itself. Now, to understand this more fully, we need to spend a little time with the story of the separate self, because the feeling of being a separate self
of being a little person inside your head, looking out at the world through the windows of your eyes, is the most fundamental and pervasive experience that most human beings have. It feels absolutely obvious. It feels like the most basic fact of existence. Of course there is a me in here. Of course I am separate from everything else out there.
Of course the world is happening to me, and I am the one experiencing it. And without me here to experience it, it would all just be empty. This feeling is so natural, so constant, so woven into the fabric of ordinary experience that most people never think to question it. It is like asking a fish to question the existence of water. And yet, if you look at it very carefully, very patiently, without rushing toward any particular conclusion, something very strange begins to emerge. The separate self, when you look for it directly, turns out to be surprisingly difficult to find. Where are you exactly? Are you in your head? Most people feel as though they are. There is a kind of center of awareness that seems to be located somewhere behind the eyes, somewhere between the ears. But if you close your eyes right now and try to find the exact location of the you that is listening to these words, you will discover something curious. You can find the sensation of your head. You can find thoughts arising. You can find awareness itself, this open quality of knowing that is present right now. But the self that is supposed to be the subject of all these experiences, the one who is having them, the little person inside the machine, that one is strangely absent. Or rather, it is not so much absent as it is the wrong kind of thing to look for. It is like trying to see your own eyes. They are the organs of seeing, and for that very reason they cannot be seen by themselves. This is one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of human thought, and it has been made independently by contemplatives, philosophers, and mystics across every culture and every century. The subject of experience is not itself an object that can be experienced. The one who is aware is not itself an object of awareness. And yet it is not nothing. You cannot say, well, there is no self, and leave it at that, and feel that you have understood something. Because right now something is listening to these words. Something is aware. Something is here. And that something is real, even if it is not the kind of thing you can point to or hold in your hand. Alan Watts used to compare this to the eye and the light. The eye depends on light to see anything at all. Without light, the eye sees only darkness. But the eye cannot see the light itself, because light is not a visible object. It is the very condition of visibility. In the same way, awareness cannot be aware of itself as an object, because awareness is the very condition that makes objects of experience possible. It is the light in which everything else becomes visible. And when you begin to understand this, when you begin to feel it, not just as an intellectual idea, but as a living recognition in your direct experience, something begins to shift, very gently, very subtly, like the almost imperceptible moment when a key turns in a lock and a door begins to open. And this is where something interesting happens. Because when you realize that you cannot find the separate self by looking for it as an object, when you realize that awareness itself is not a thing, but more like a happening, more like a verb than a noun, more like a process than a possession, you begin to look at the rest of your experience differently. You begin to notice that everything is a process. Everything is a happening. The chair or the floor beneath you is not a solid thing. It is a process of atomic and subatomic activity so complex and so fast that it appears solid to your senses. Your body is not a thing. It is a process, constantly replacing its own cells, constantly exchanging matter and energy with its environment, breathing in and breathing out, digesting and metabolizing, and maintaining the astonishing complexity of its organization without any central manager telling it what to do. Even your thoughts are not things. They are events. They arise, they persist for a moment, and they dissolve, making space for the next thought, which in turn arises and dissolves and makes space for the next. Everything is flowing. Everything is moving. Everything is in a constant state of becoming something other than what it was. And yet within all of this movement, all of this flowing and changing and becoming, there is something that remains. Not a fixed thing, not a solid substance that persists unchanged through all the change, but a quality of presence, a quality of awareness, a quality of here-ness that is present in every moment of your experience. Whether the experiences themselves are pleasant or unpleasant, interesting or dull, profound or trivial. There was a beautiful and ancient story from the Hindu tradition that Alan Watts loved to tell in different forms and variations throughout his lectures. It is the story of Brahman playing hide and seek with itself. According to this story, the universe is not a machine that some external god set in motion and then left running, nor is it an accident, a meaningless collision of particles that happen to produce, among other things, beings capable of wondering about their own existence. It is, according to this vision, something more like a game. Brahman, which is the name this tradition gives to the ultimate nature of reality, the ground of all being, the source from which everything arises and to which everything returns. Brahman is said to have created the universe by pretending to be many different things, by playing the role of every rock and every river, every star and every galaxy, every plant and every animal, and every human being who has ever drawn a breath. The universe is Brahman dreaming. The universe is the one reality, playing an infinite game of becoming other than itself, of forgetting its own nature in order to rediscover it, of hiding in order to enjoy the wonder and surprise of finding. And you are one of those hiding places. You are one of the places where the universe has hidden itself from itself in order to experience the extraordinary adventure of waking up and discovering what it is. Your sense of being a separate self, your feeling of being an isolated individual surrounded by an alien world, is not a mistake or a failure. It is part of the game. It is the hiding. And this moment, this quiet moment as you listen to these words and feel sleep beginning to gather around you, is part of the finding. Now, I want you to consider something that might seem very strange at first, but which becomes increasingly obvious the more you think about it. You did not choose to be born. You did not choose your body, your brain, your initial personality, the language you think in, the culture that shaped your values and your assumptions about what is real and what is possible. None of that was chosen by you, because there was no you yet to do the choosing. You arrived in the world, and gradually, as your nervous system developed and your brain learned to model itself and its environment, the sense of being a self arose. The feeling of being a continuous, bounded, individual entity arose. And it felt so natural, so obvious, so completely like the truth, that you simply took it as the truth. But here is the strange part. Everything that you are, everything that has made you, you, came from somewhere else. The atoms in your body were forged in the hearts of ancient stars and scattered through the cosmos billions of years ago. The information in your DNA was assembled by billions of years of evolution, a process so vast and so complex that no human mind can fully comprehend it. The language you think in was created by thousands of generations of human beings who lived and struggled and died before you were born. The ideas you use to understand your experience, the very categories of thought that seem so natural and self-evident, were invented over centuries by thinkers whose names you may or may not know. Everything that you are is a gift from the universe. Everything that you are is the universe expressing itself in this particular form, in this particular place, at this particular moment in time. And so the question arises, where does the universe end and you begin? Where does the outside stop and the inside start? Is the air you breathe inside you or outside you? It is outside you until you breathe it in, and then it is inside you, and then you breathe it out, and it becomes outside again. Is the food you eat inside you or outside you? It enters your body and is broken down and incorporated into your cells and becomes literally part of what you are, and then in turn is released back into the environment as heat and breath and waste. The boundary between you and the world, when you look at it closely, turns out to be more like a membrane than a wall, more like a shoreline than a dividing line, more like a place of constant and intimate exchange than a separation. Alan Watts used to make this point in a particularly vivid way by talking about the horizon. If you stand on a hilltop and look out at the landscape, you can see a horizon, a line where the earth seems to end and the sky seems to begin. But if you walk toward the horizon, it does not come any closer. It moves away from you at the same pace as you advance. The horizon is not a real line on the surface of the earth. It is an artifact of your point of view. It is a function of where you are standing and what your eyes can see from that position. And in the same way, the boundary between self and world, between inside and outside, between you and not you, is not a real line in the fabric of nature. It is an artifact of a particular way of organizing experience. A useful artifact, to be sure, indispensable for navigating everyday life, but not ultimately real, not ultimately true, not the deepest description of what is actually happening. And this is where the teaching gets very interesting. Because if the boundary between self and world is not ultimately real, if you and the universe are more like two aspects of one process than two separate things, then something very important follows from that. Your life, this particular unfolding of events and experiences that has been happening since the moment you were born, is not something that is happening to you. It is something that is happening as you. The universe is not something that happened to produce you as one of its unfortunate or fortunate byproducts. You are one of the ways the universe is happening, one of the forms the universe is taking as it moves through time, one of the patterns in which the cosmic energy organizes itself for a while before dissolving and reorganizing into something new. Think about a whirlpool in a river. A whirlpool is not a thing, it is a pattern. It is a particular way that the water moves for a while before the movement changes and the pattern dissolves. But while the whirlpool exists, it is real. It has a shape and a location and a behavior. You can point to it. You can measure it. You can watch it interact with other patterns in the water. And yet it has no fixed substance. The water that constitutes it right now is not the same water that constituted it a moment ago. It is a persistent pattern in a flowing medium. And you are something like that, a persistent pattern in the flowing medium of the universe. This is not a diminishment. This is not a way of saying that you do not matter, or that your experience is not real, or that you are somehow less than you thought you were. If anything, it is the opposite. Because if you are a pattern in the universe, then the universe is not something you are stuck inside of. The universe is something you are part of. The universe is something you are a manifestation of. The universe is not your container. It is your body, your larger body. The body that breathes through you, and thinks through you, and feels through you, and wonders about itself through you. Let us pause here for a moment and simply feel that. Not as an intellectual concept, not as a philosophical position to be agreed with or disagreed with, but as a direct recognition of what is happening right now. Right now, this moment, this listening, this awareness, this breathing body lying in the quiet of the evening. This is the universe happening. This is the cosmos doing what it does. This is the ground of all being expressing itself in the form of a human being who is almost asleep and who is listening to words about the nature of reality, and perhaps beginning, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, to remember something that was always known, but somehow got covered over by the busyness and the noise of everyday life. There is a very old phrase in the Sanskrit tradition, Tat Tvam Asi. It is usually translated as, that art thou, or more colloquially, you are that. That being the ground of all being, the ultimate reality, the thing that cannot be named, because it is the naming and the named at once. You are that. Not in a future life, when you have become enlightened or purified or spiritually accomplished. Not in some other dimension of existence that is higher or deeper or more real than this one. Right now, here, in this moment, in this body, with this mind, with all of its confusions and contradictions, and unsatisfied longings and unexamined assumptions. You are that. The universe is not something you need to reach or attain or deserve. It is what you are, and the only thing standing between you
and the direct recognition of this is a very particular kind of thinking, a particular habit of attention.
The habit of always treating yourself as the subject and the world as the object. The habit of always looking outward for the source of what you are. But here is the strange part. The universe did not become aware of itself for the first time when human beings appeared on this planet. Awareness is not something that humans invented or produced. Awareness is not something that brains secrete the way livers secrete bile. Awareness is something much more fundamental than that, something that is woven into the very fabric of what exists. When you look up at the night sky and see the stars, you might think that you are a small thing looking at a large thing, a tiny creature on a small planet in an unremarkable solar system on the outer arm of an ordinary galaxy, peering up at a cosmos of inconceivable size and antiquity. And that is true, in one sense. Measured in light years and megaparsecs, you are indeed very small. Measured in billions of years, the span of your life is indeed very brief. But here is another way to look at it. When you look up at the stars, the universe is looking at itself. When you wonder about the nature of existence, the universe is wondering about its own nature. When you feel the strange and vertiginous sensation of being a conscious being in an incomprehensibly large cosmos, that is the cosmos feeling that sensation. You are not separate from the universe that you are contemplating. You are the universe contemplating itself. And that is not a small thing. That is perhaps the most extraordinary thing that has ever happened in this universe. The universe waking up to its own existence through the medium of conscious life. Alan Watts often used the metaphor of a hand to illustrate the relationship between individual consciousness and the universe. He would point out that a hand has 5 fingers, and each finger is distinct. Each one has its own shape, its own position, its own character. The thumb is very different from the little finger, and yet they are all expressions of the same hand. They all arise from the same palm. They all share the same blood and the same nerves and the same animating life. And the fingers do not compete with each other for the title of the real finger. They do not argue about which one of them is truly the hand. They simply are what they are, each one fully and completely itself. And together they constitute something that none of them individually could be. And in the same way, every human being, every conscious creature, every aware being in this universe is something like a finger of the cosmic hand. Each one distinct, each one individual, each one fully and completely itself, and yet each one an expression of the same underlying nature. Each one arising from the same ground, each one participating in the same great mystery of existence. The diversity is not a problem to be solved. The multiplicity of forms and perspectives and experiences is not a confusion to be cleared up. It is the very nature of what is. It is the universe being inexhaustibly creative with itself, being fascinated by its own potential, discovering, through the medium of conscious life, what it is possible to experience and to know and to love and to suffer and to wonder about. There is a practice that some contemplative traditions recommend, which I would like to invite you to try right now, in a very gentle and relaxed way. It does not require any special effort. It does not require you to concentrate
or to achieve or to attain anything. It only requires you to notice something that is already the case. As you listen to these words, and as you feel your body becoming heavier and more relaxed, simply notice that there is awareness present. Not the contents of awareness, not the thoughts and sensations and sounds that are arising within awareness, just awareness itself. The simple fact of knowing. The simple fact of being here.
The simple fact that something is present and awake, even as the body grows still and the mind grows quiet. Can you notice that? Can you sense that simple presence, that simple here-ness, that quality of being aware that does not itself require effort or maintenance? You did not have to turn it on. It was already on when you began listening to these words. You did not have to create it or earn it. It is simply what you are. The most fundamental, most intimate, most inescapably present aspect of your entire existence is this simple fact of awareness, this simple fact of being here. And this awareness is not something that began when you were born and will end when you die, not in the way that the assumption feels. Because awareness is not a product of the body, the way heat is a product of a fire. Awareness is something more like the space in which the body and its experiences arise. And space does not depend on the particular objects that appear within it. The space of a room does not shrink when the furniture is removed. Now, I want to tell you a story, a very old story, told in many different forms, in many different traditions, but always pointing toward the same recognition. Once upon a time, or perhaps outside of time altogether, there was a being who knew only itself. And this being was everything. It was the source and the substance and the structure of everything that could possibly exist. It was infinite awareness, infinite presence, infinite being. And it was utterly alone. Not alone in a sad or painful sense, because there was nothing outside of it to compare itself with, and no sense of lack or absence, only the pure fullness of its own being. But there was also, in this infinity, no experience, because experience requires a contrast. Experience requires a this and a that, a here and a there, a now and a then. Experience requires the appearance of multiplicity within what is fundamentally one. And so this being did the only thing it could do, to experience itself. It began to imagine boundaries. It began to pretend that here and there, this and that, self and other, were real. It began to dream up a multiplicity of separate perspectives, each one experiencing the world as though it were fundamentally alone and separate and bounded. And in doing this, it created the universe, not as a product that is separate from it, not as a machine that it built and set in motion and then stepped back from, but as itself, playing the game of being many, playing the game of being separate, playing the game of forgetting its own infinite nature in order to rediscover it through the medium of experience. And every moment of genuine recognition, every moment when a human being or any conscious creature suddenly sees through the illusion of separation and recognizes its own deeper nature, every such moment is the universe waking up from its own dream. Every such moment
is the infinite remembering itself through the medium of the finite. Every such moment is the game reaching its most beautiful resolution. The moment when the seeker discovers that what they have been seeking has always been what they are. There is something that happens to the body when you begin to genuinely feel this. Not as an idea, not as a comforting thought, but as a direct recognition. The body relaxes in a way that goes much deeper than ordinary relaxation. Because most of what we call tension, most of what we carry in our muscles and our posture and the set of our jaws and the furrow of our brows, is not purely physical. It is the physical expression of a fundamental assumption, the assumption that I am alone here, the assumption that I am responsible for holding everything together, the assumption that if I relax my vigilance, if I stop managing and controlling and anticipating and defending, something terrible will happen. The assumption that the universe is not on my side.
But if the universe is not something outside of you, something alien and indifferent that you must navigate and survive, but rather something that you are a manifestation of, something that is expressing itself through you, then that assumption begins to loosen its grip. Not because you have talked yourself into believing something comforting, but because you have begun to see something true. And in the seeing, the body can begin to let go of a holding that it has maintained for perhaps your entire life. The shoulders can drop. The breath can deepen. The jaw can unclench. The belly can soften. Because the one who was doing all that holding, the one who felt so alone and so responsible and so beleaguered, turns out to have been a kind of dream character, a pattern of tension in awareness, mistaking itself for a fixed and isolated self. And as the dream lightens and begins to dissolve, the tension that maintained it can begin to dissolve as well. This is where something interesting happens, because the dissolution of the separate self is not the same thing as the dissolution of the individual. You do not disappear when you see through the illusion of separation. Your preferences and memories and the particular flavor of your experience do not evaporate. The pattern that you are does not cease to be a pattern, but the quality of the pattern changes, or rather, the quality of your relationship to the pattern changes. Instead of being contracted around it, identified with it, defending it and maintaining it with tremendous effort and anxiety, you can begin to hold it more lightly, the way the ocean holds a wave, not as something foreign and problematic that must be controlled, but as one of the innumerable ways it expresses its own nature. Alan Watts was fond of pointing out that the reason most people find it so difficult to let go, the reason most people find genuine relaxation so elusive, is not that they do not know how. It is that they do not trust. They do not trust the universe enough to let themselves be carried by it. They feel that they must do the carrying themselves. They feel that if they stop pushing, everything will fall apart. And this feeling is understandable. It makes a certain kind of sense, given the stories we tell about who we are and what the world is. But it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Because you are not carrying the universe. The universe is carrying you. The universe has always been carrying you,
Every heartbeat is the universe beating. Every breath is the universe breathing. The capacity to see and hear and think and feel is not something you generate independently. It is something the universe is doing through you, and it does not require your supervision. The heart does not ask for your permission to beat. The lungs do not wait for your instructions before they breathe. The neurons in your brain do not consult your ego before they fire their intricate patterns of recognition and response. All of this is happening. All of this is the universe doing what it does through the medium of what you call yourself. And you, the you that you think you are, the little manager inside the head who is constantly trying to control and direct and improve and protect, that you is not in charge. That you never was in charge. That you is more like the foam on top of the wave than the wave itself. More like the label on the bottle than the wine inside. But here is the extraordinary thing. The fact that you are not in charge does not mean that you do not matter. The foam is part of the wave. The label is part of the wine story. The individual is part of the universe's expression. And there is a great beauty in each particular pattern, each particular form, each particular life. The fact that you are a temporary pattern does not mean that the pattern is insignificant. Every snowflake is temporary. It forms in the cold air above and falls and melts in the warmth below. The entire existence of a snowflake might last only minutes. But no one who has looked closely at a snowflake has ever thought that this brevity makes it less beautiful or less worthy of attention. Each snowflake is an unrepeatable expression of the physics of water and cold, a unique configuration that will never exist again in quite this form. And each human life is something like that, an unrepeatable configuration, a unique expression of the universe's infinite creativity, brief in the scale of cosmic time, but no less real for that. No less significant for that, no less worthy of being lived fully and felt deeply and appreciated for exactly what it is. There is a Japanese concept called mono no aware, which translates roughly as the pathos of things, or the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. It is the feeling you get when you see the cherry blossoms falling, when you watch the sun setting over the ocean, when you hold a very young child and are suddenly struck by the knowledge that this child is already moving through time toward age and death. It is not a sad feeling exactly, or rather it is sad and beautiful at the same time. It is the recognition that the very thing that makes a moment precious is its passing, that the very thing that gives beauty its peculiar ache is the fact that it does not last. And this is not a reason to be sad about life. It is a reason to be awake to it, to be present to it, to let it matter. Because if you live your life always reaching forward to some future moment when things will finally be right, when you will finally have enough, or be enough, or know enough, you will miss the actual moments of your life as they pass through you, like water through the hands of someone trying to hold it. You will arrive at the end of your life and discover that you were never quite here for it.
You were always preparing for it, or recovering from it, or wishing it were different. But you were never quite simply in it, never quite simply alive to it, never quite simply grateful for the staggering gift of being at all. This is perhaps the deepest and most practically useful thing in all of Alan Watts's teaching. Not the cosmology, not the philosophy of non-duality, or the insights about consciousness and the universe. All of that is wonderful and true and important. But underneath all of it is something simpler, something more immediate, something that does not require any special knowledge or spiritual attainment to access. The invitation to be here. The invitation to stop missing your life by being somewhere else in your mind. The invitation to discover that this moment, the only moment that has ever existed or ever will exist, is sufficient. Not in the sense that nothing should ever change or improve, not in the sense that striving and growing and working toward something better is wrong, but in the sense that the present moment, whatever its contents, is the place where life is actually happening. The past is a memory arising now. The future is an anticipation arising now. The only place where experience actually occurs is here, is now, is this. And the strange and wonderful irony is that when you stop trying to get somewhere else, when you stop treating the present moment as an obstacle or a waiting room between where you are and where you want to be, when you settle into the present moment with genuine acceptance and openness, you discover that it is already complete, already whole, already more than enough. Not because the circumstances are perfect, or because there is nothing to be worked on or improved, but because the quality of presence itself, the simple fact of being here and aware and alive, is intrinsically satisfying in a way that no future attainment ever quite is.
Every goal, when it is reached, becomes the new present moment, and the mind that was never satisfied with the previous present moment will not be satisfied with this new one either. The satisfaction, when it comes, does not come from reaching the goal. It comes from the moments along the way when the mind stops striving long enough to notice what is already here. And this is where something interesting happens with the question of sleep, because sleep is one of the most profound invitations to let go that life offers us. Every night you are asked to surrender. Every night you are asked to release your grip on consciousness, to stop managing and controlling and narrating and planning, to let the self and its projects and its anxieties dissolve for a few hours into the dark and the quiet and the not knowing. And most people resist this, not dramatically, not consciously, but there is a quality of holding on in the mind, even as the body grows tired, a reluctance to let go, a clinging to the thread of conscious identity, a slight anxiety about the dissolution of self that sleep represents. Because in sleep, you disappear. The self that manages your life, the one who knows your name and your history and your plans and your worries, that self goes somewhere else. Or perhaps it is more accurate to say that it goes nowhere, because there is no somewhere to go to in dreamless sleep. It simply ceases to operate, and something else takes over. Something that keeps the heart beating and the breath moving and the body repairing itself and the brain consolidating the day's learning. Something that does not need your supervision. Something that is far more competent and reliable and wise
than your conscious self ever could be. And every morning, you wake up from this dissolution. You come back. The self reassembles itself from whatever it is made of and picks up where it left off. And you think of this as a return to the real,
as emerging from the unreal into the real. But perhaps it is the other way around. Perhaps the waking state, with its sharp sense of boundaries and separateness and individual identity, is the dream, and the deep sleep state, the state of pure consciousness without an object, the state of being without content, perhaps that is the ground from which the dream arises, and to which it will eventually return. There is a threefold teaching in the Hindu tradition about the states of consciousness. The first state is the waking state, which is called Jagrat. The ordinary daylight consciousness, aware of the external world, navigating the world of distinct objects and events and people, the world of multiplicity and change. The second state is the dreaming state, called Svapna, the state of sleep with dreams, in which the mind creates its own interior world out of its own substance, a world that feels completely real while you are in it, but which reveals itself to be a product of mind when you wake from it. The third state is the state of dreamless sleep, called Sushupti, the state of deep, dreamless, undifferentiated consciousness, pure awareness without content, pure being without experience. And then the tradition speaks of a fourth state called Turiya, which means simply the fourth. And the remarkable thing about this fourth state is that it is not actually a fourth state alongside the other three. It is the ground in which all three arise. It is the awareness that is present in waking, present in dreaming, and present even in dreamless sleep. The awareness of which you are not conscious in dreamless sleep, only because in that state there is nothing to be conscious of, not because awareness itself is absent. Turiya is what you are before you are anything in particular. The open, boundless, contentless awareness from which waking and dreaming and deep sleep all arise like waves from the ocean, and to which they all return. And the extraordinary claim of this tradition is not that you should try to attain or achieve this fourth state. You cannot attain what you already are. The claim is that recognizing what you already are, recognizing this open awareness as your true nature, rather than the particular pattern of personality and history and preference that appears within it, that recognition is what all the spiritual teaching of all traditions is ultimately pointing toward. That recognition is what the Zen masters were trying to trigger with their koans. That recognition is what the Christian mystics were trying to describe when they talked about the peace that surpasseth understanding. That recognition is what the Sufi poets were trying to evoke with their ecstatic verses about the annihilation of self in the divine presence. Different maps, the same territory. Let us float a little now. Let us follow the thread of awareness deeper into the night. You are very relaxed. Your body is heavy and still. The world outside is quiet. And somewhere in the space between your last thought and the one that has not yet arisen, there is a quality of openness, a quality of spaciousness, a quality of simple being that does not need to justify or explain itself. Can you feel that? Not as something to be grasped or achieved,
just as something to be noticed. The way you might notice the quality of the light in a room without trying to possess it or analyze it. Just noticing. Just here. Just this. The philosopher Meister Eckhart, the great medieval Christian mystic, wrote something that would have sounded deeply familiar to any Hindu or Buddhist sage. He wrote of what he called the ground of the soul, the innermost depth of being where the soul meets God, where the individual touches the universal, where the finite participates in the infinite. And he was careful to say that this ground is not reached by striving. It is not found by going somewhere or doing something.
It is found by stopping, by being still, by letting fall everything that is added on, everything that is acquired, everything that is the result of learning and effort and accumulation, and discovering what remains when all of that is stripped away. What remains when you stop performing the role of yourself. What remains when you stop trying to be anything at all. He called it the divine darkness. Not the darkness of ignorance or absence, but the darkness of an excess of light. The way you cannot see a candle flame if you are standing inside the sun. The ordinary light of consciousness, the ordinary light of the ego and its cognitions and its narratives, that light is too dim to illuminate the ground of being. And so the ground of being appears to the ordinary mind as darkness, as emptiness, as nothing. But to the mind that has become very still, very quiet, very transparent, that nothingness reveals itself as a fullness beyond all conception, a presence beyond all presence, a being so complete and so whole and so sufficient that no word or image or concept can contain it. I want to tell you another story. This one is a thought experiment, a little journey of imagination that Alan Watts was fond of taking his audiences on. Imagine that you could dream any dream you wanted. Not just any pleasant dream, but literally any experience you can conceive of, with perfect vividness and perfect reality. Every night you go to sleep and you enter this dream world where you are in complete control of the narrative. You can be anyone. You can do anything. You can have any adventure, any love affair, any triumph. Whatever you want, you can have in this dream, with perfect reality, perfect vividness, perfect satisfaction. How would you use this power? What would you dream? At first, you would probably dream of wonderful things, exciting things, pleasurable things, perfect days, beautiful places, everything going exactly the way you wanted to. And for a while, this would be wonderful. But after a few thousand nights of always getting exactly what you want, of everything always going perfectly, you would begin to feel a very particular kind of boredom. The boredom of nothing unexpected ever happening. The boredom of no contrast, no challenge, no surprise. And gradually, you would begin to introduce complications into the dream. A little adversity, a little uncertainty, a story with some actual tension in it, some genuine not knowing how it turns out. And then, after a while, you might go further. You might dream of adventures so vivid and so real that you actually forgot while you were in them that they were dreams. You might dream of a whole life, with a whole history, and a whole personality, and a whole set of fears and desires, and unresolved questions.
and you would be so immersed in this dream that the fact of dreaming it would be completely invisible to you. And then one night, inside the dream, someone would sit down beside you and say, "Do you know what is quietly happening inside your mind right now, while you are listening to this?" And something would stir in you, some faint recognition, some sense that there is more to this than it appears. This is the game. This is the hiding and the seeking. This is Brahman playing at being you, and you playing at being separate from Brahman, and both of you, in this very moment, on the edge of the great recognition. On the edge of the moment when the dream begins to grow transparent, and the dreamer shines through. There is a quality that all the great contemplative traditions agree on when they try to describe the experience of genuine spiritual awakening. Or not awakening, because that word implies a binary, a before and an after, a distinction between the sleeping and the woken. Let us say instead, the experience of genuine seeing. The quality they all agree on is one of utter simplicity.
Not simplicity in the sense of lacking complexity, but simplicity in the sense of being direct, immediate, unmediated. The feeling that what is being seen has always been completely obvious, has always been right here, has always been the most present and undeniable fact of existence, and that all the obscuring of it has been done by thought and language and the accumulation of concepts, never by anything in reality itself. The Zen tradition has a phrase for this. The ordinary mind is the Buddha mind. What you are looking for is what is looking. The enlightened state is not some extraordinary altered state of consciousness that a special few people achieve after years of heroic spiritual effort. The enlightened state is this, is the ordinary awareness that is present right now. The only thing that is different about the person who is said to be enlightened is not what they experience, but how they hold what they experience. Not with the tight, anxious, grasping quality of the ego trying to make itself secure, but with the open, spacious, unclenched quality of awareness that has recognized itself as the ground rather than the content of experience, as the sky rather than the weather, as the ocean rather than any particular wave. And this is where something interesting happens in terms of the practical implications for how we live. Because if you spend your life trying to accumulate more, to become more, to secure more, to protect and defend and expand the territory of your separate self, you will live in a permanent state of low-level anxiety. Not necessarily the dramatic, acute anxiety of a person in crisis, but the quiet, chronic, background anxiety of someone who feels fundamentally incomplete and is always trying to complete themselves, always trying to find the thing that will finally make them feel whole, always looking for the experience or the achievement or the relationship that will finally make the underlying unease go away. But if you begin to see, even a little, even imperfectly and intermittently, that you are already whole, that awareness itself, the simple fact of being here and knowing that you are here, is already complete, already sufficient, already the very thing you have been looking for without knowing it, then the energy that was going into that anxious searching begins to become available for something else,
for genuine engagement with what is here, for genuine curiosity about this extraordinary situation of being alive, for genuine compassion for others who are caught in the same dream of separation and who are suffering as a result. This is what the Buddhist tradition means by compassion, not pity, not the feeling of a person who has it together looking down at a person who does not, but the recognition that the separation and the suffering and the confusion are universal, that every being is doing the best it can given the story it finds itself living inside of, that the person who causes harm is causing it out of their own confusion and fear and the mistaken belief that they are separate and that getting what they want at the expense of others is somehow going to make them feel whole. It will not. Nothing in the world of objects and achievements and accumulations ever will. Because the wholeness that is being sought is not found in the world of objects. It is found in the recognition of what you are before you are anything in particular. The night sky has always been one of the great teachers. This is true across every culture and every civilization that has ever existed on this planet. Before there were cities and electric lights, before there were the 1,000 artificial illuminations that fill our nights and dim the stars, every human being who lay down to sleep on a clear night would have had the experience of looking up into a depth of blackness, scattered with points of light that we can now barely imagine from our light-polluted urban perspectives. The Milky Way overhead, the band of light that is the interior view of our own galaxy, the billions of individual stars visible to the naked eye, the occasional slow movement of a planet, the brief, bright scratch of a meteor. All of this, every night, an invitation to feel very small and yet paradoxically connected to something so vast that the mind cannot contain it and so must simply rest in it. And this is what the night sky does to us when we actually let ourselves look at it. It does not make us feel annihilated or meaningless, though the scale is so vast that it ought to overwhelm us. It makes us feel something much more interesting. It makes us feel curious. It makes us feel that there is more to existence than we have ever conceived. It makes us feel that the boundaries we draw around our little lives, the urgent importance of our daily concerns, the finality of our beliefs about what is possible, all of that becomes relative, contextual, provisional, when seen against the background of this immensity. And there is a peace in that, a very particular kind of peace. The peace of knowing that you are part of something so much larger than yourself, that the things that trouble you, the failures and the embarrassments, and the unresolved conflicts, and the unrealized ambitions, they shrink to a more proportionate size. They become things that matter within the particular scale of a human life, but they lose the absolute and crushing importance that they tend to assume when the horizon of your attention is only the span of your immediate circumstances.
This is one of the gifts that philosophy gives at its best. Not a set of answers, not a doctrine or a creed or a set of beliefs to adopt and defend, but a widening of the horizon, a shift in perspective that reveals that the story you have been telling about your life, the story that has felt so absolute, so all-encompassing, so completely like the only story that could possibly be told, is in fact just one story.
one of an infinite number of possible stories that could be told about the same facts. And when you see this, when you genuinely feel the contingency of the story you have been living inside, something very important becomes possible. Not the abandonment of all stories. We need stories to navigate our lives. Language is a story. Identity is a story. Culture is a story. These are not things to be discarded. But when you hold them as stories, as useful and meaningful and important stories, rather than as the absolute and inescapable truth about what you are and what the world is, then you have a freedom that was not available before. A freedom to choose more wisely among the available stories. A freedom to update your story as new understanding arrives. A freedom to hold your story with a lighter grip, to laugh at it sometimes, to be surprised by it, to allow it to be revised and deepened by encounter with other stories, other perspectives, other ways of being human in this extraordinary and inexplicable situation we all find ourselves in. Alan Watts was a master of this kind of story shifting. He had an extraordinary gift for taking an idea that everyone took for granted, an idea so familiar and so obvious that it had become invisible, and turning it around and showing you that what you had been taking for the only possible way of seeing things was in fact only one of many possible ways, and not necessarily the most interesting or the most true or the most liberating of them.
He would take the concept of the self and show that it was a very recent cultural invention, not a timeless and universal truth. He would take the concept of death and show that it was based on a particular assumption about what you are that did not hold up under examination. He would take the concept of God and show that the arguments for and against the existence of such a being were largely beside the point, because they were conducted within a framework of thought that had already excluded the most important insight. And he would do all of this not to be clever, not to impress people with the virtuosity of his philosophical gymnastics, but in service of something he genuinely believed was possible for ordinary human beings living ordinary lives. The possibility of waking up within the dream. The possibility of discovering right here, in the midst of the confusion and the busyness and the suffering of ordinary human life, the secret that the dream is hiding, the secret that you are more than you think you are, that the universe is not what you think it is, that the relationship between the two, between you and the universe, is not what you think it is, and that discovering this, truly discovering it, not as an intellectual position, but as a lived recognition, changes everything and changes nothing. And in the changing of everything and nothing simultaneously, creates the only freedom that is actually worth having. Let us talk for a moment about the relationship between thought and experience, because this is where a great deal of confusion arises, and where a great deal of unnecessary suffering has its root. We live, in the modern Western world especially, in a culture that places an extraordinarily high value on thinking, on rational analysis, on the ability to conceptualize and categorize and explain. This is not a mistake. Rational thought is an extraordinary gift. Science and medicine and technology and all the practical improvements in human life that they have produced are the fruits of the capacity for systematic, rational thought. And yet there is something that rational thought, for all its extraordinary power, cannot do. Rational thought cannot give you the direct experience of anything. It can describe experiences. It can analyze experiences after the fact. It can make predictions about what experiences will be like. But it cannot deliver the actual experience itself. You can read every book ever written about the color red. You can study the physics of light in the frequency range that the eye perceives as red. You can learn the neuropsychology of color perception, the cultural history of the color red, the symbolism of red in different traditions. But none of that will give you the direct, immediate, utterly unmistakable experience of actually seeing red. For that, you need only to open your eyes in a room where there is something red. And then it is immediate, unmediated, completely obvious, no inference required. And the great mystics of every tradition are saying something like this about the nature of reality. They are saying that the deepest truth about what you are and what the universe is cannot be delivered by thought, cannot be contained in any concept or doctrine or philosophy, however sophisticated, can only be directly experienced, directly recognized, directly felt. And they are saying that this direct recognition is available right now to anyone who is willing to stop looking for it in the realm of thought and simply attend to what is immediately present. This does not mean that thought is the enemy. It means that thought is a tool, a very powerful and very useful tool. But like all tools, it is most useful when you know what it is for and what it is not for. A hammer is wonderful for driving nails, and it is completely useless for seeing in the dark. The rational mind is wonderful for solving problems and navigating the practical dimensions of life, and it is completely useless as the means of accessing your own deepest nature. For that, you need something else. Something that is not the opposite of thought, not irrationality or superstition or the abandonment of critical intelligence, but something that is prior to thought, something that is the ground out of which thought arises. That simple, open, contentless awareness that we have been circling around all through this evening. And the invitation of all genuine contemplative practice across all traditions is simply to let thought settle. Not to stop thinking, because you cannot stop thinking any more than you can stop the wind by wanting it to stop. But to stop believing so completely in every thought that arises. To create a little space around thoughts. To let them arise and pass without immediately grabbing them and building a whole architecture of meaning and significance and personal narrative around them. To let the water settle until it is clear enough to see the bottom. There is a beautiful Taoist image that is relevant here. The Tao Te Ching, one of the oldest and most profound works of philosophy ever written, speaks of Wu Wei, usually translated as non-action, or doing without doing, or effortless action. But this translation can be misleading if it suggests passivity or laziness. Wu Wei does not mean doing nothing. It means acting in accordance with the natural flow of things, rather than against it. It means the kind of action that arises spontaneously and completely, and without the interference of the anxious, calculating, self-conscious ego.
Think of a skilled dancer, or a skilled musician, or a skilled athlete in the zone. When they are at their best, they are not thinking about what they are doing. They are not applying rules or consulting a manual of instructions.
They are simply doing, and the doing flows through them with a quality of effortlessness that is unmistakable to anyone watching. The Zen archers call it mushin, no mind. The musicians call it being in the flow. The athletes call it being in the zone. The contemplatives call it surrender. But they are all pointing at the same quality, the quality of action that arises when the self gets out of the way, when the doer dissolves into the doing, when there is no longer a someone who is doing something, only the doing itself, expressing itself through the medium of a human body and mind without interference. And this, Alan Watts would say, is what the whole of existence is like, from the inside. The universe is not something that is being done by someone. It is something that is doing itself. It is the ultimate wu-wei, the effortless action, the doing without a doer, the happening that happens without anyone making it happen. And you are part of that. Your life, when you stop trying to manage it from outside, when you stop treating yourself as the manager and your life as the managed, when you discover that you are the river and not someone trying to navigate the river from a raft, your life becomes something more like that too, more spontaneous, more alive, more fully itself, more in tune with the deeper patterns of which it is an expression. The rain falls, the rivers flow to the sea, the seasons cycle, the stars move in their ancient patterns. The cells of your body know exactly what to do without being told. Your immune system identifies threats and marshals defenses with a complexity and precision that would make the most sophisticated military organization look crude by comparison. Your brain processes an unimaginable quantity of information every second, constructing your experience of a coherent, three-dimensional world full of meaning and pattern from the buzzing chaos of raw sensory data. All of this is happening. All of this is the universe doing its extraordinary thing through you, with you, as you. And none of it requires the permission or the supervision of the conscious ego. What would it mean to actually trust this? Not as a belief you try to hold because it sounds comforting, but as a genuine recognition, felt in the body, as well as understood by the mind. What would it mean to actually let go? Not once, not as a grand spiritual gesture, but moment by moment, breath by breath, letting go of the tension in the belly, letting go of the clench in the jaw, letting go of the story that this moment needs to be different from what it is, letting go of the assumption that somewhere else would be better, or that some future arrangement of circumstances will finally make it okay to relax. What would it mean to discover, right here, right now, exactly as things are, the sufficiency that you have been looking for in every elsewhere? The Tibetan tradition speaks of what they call Rigpa, the Tibetan word for awareness. But not just any awareness. Rigpa is the awareness of awareness, the knowing quality that knows itself, the recognition of the open, luminous, contentless nature of mind as it is, before thoughts arise and after thoughts subside. And this tradition says that this recognition,
This direct seeing of awareness as it is the most natural thing in the world. More natural than thinking. More natural than doing anything. More natural than being anything in particular. Because it is what you are before you are anything in particular. The tradition says that seeking Rigpa is like searching for your own eyes with your eyes. You cannot fail to find it. You can only fail to recognize what you have already found. And the failure of recognition is not a moral failing. It is simply what happens when you are looking for the wrong thing in the wrong direction. Looking for awareness as an object rather than recognizing it as the subject.
Looking for the ground of being in the realm of thought and concept, rather than in the direct and immediate feel of being here. The invitation is always simply to look again, to look without prejudging what you will find, to be genuinely curious, genuinely open, genuinely willing to be surprised by what is actually the case. And in that openness, that willingness, that suspension of the usual certainty that you already know what is going on, something has room to reveal itself that has no room when the mind is full of its own assumptions. I want to tell you about a particular kind of silence. Not the silence of an empty room, or the silence of a forest on a still day, or the silence that follows a loud noise, but the silence that is underneath all sounds, the silence that holds all sounds, the way the sky holds all weather. This silence is not a particular experience you need to create or seek out. It is always present, always here. Behind every sound, behind every thought, behind every sensation. It is the background without which no foreground would be possible. And there is a way of letting attention rest in this silence, without grasping it, without trying to hold it, without making it into a project or a goal. Just noticing it, just recognizing that it is there, that underneath the content of your experience, underneath the stream of thoughts and feelings and sensations and sounds, there is a quality of stillness that is completely undisturbed. This stillness does not belong to you, or rather, it belongs to you in the deepest possible sense, in the sense that it is what you most fundamentally are, but not in the sense of a possession that you own and that others do not have. This stillness is universal. Every conscious being that has ever existed has this same quality of stillness at its depths, not as a private possession, but as the universal ground, the space in which all experience occurs, the silence in which all sounds arise, the darkness from which all light shines. And when you rest in this stillness, when you let attention settle into it, rather than always chasing the next object or the next thought, there is a quality of rightness to it, a quality of being exactly where you are supposed to be, a quality of homecoming. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you were genuinely surprised by your own existence? When was the last time you were stopped in your tracks by the sheer improbability, the sheer strangeness, the sheer miracle of the fact that there is something rather than nothing, that you are here at all, that this is happening, that there is experience, that there is awareness, that there is a universe to be aware of, that the universe is structured in such a way that it can generate beings capable of wondering about it,
When was the last time any of that struck you as extraordinary? Most of us, most of the time, are too busy with the content of our lives to notice the miracle of the fact of our lives. Too busy with what is happening to notice that anything is happening at all. Too busy with the particular character of experience to notice the sheer and absolute strangeness of experience as such. Too busy with the specific flavor of this moment to notice the astonishing fact of there being a this moment, a now, a here, a something rather than nothing. And this, Alan Watts would say, is the original amnesia, the original forgetting. Not the forgetting of some special spiritual truth that you once knew and have since lost, but the forgetting of the most obvious and immediate thing in existence, the forgetting of the miracle that is happening right now. Because what is happening right now is extraordinary. Something is aware. Something is here.
In a universe that could have been simply nothing, in a cosmos that might have remained forever at the stage of radiation and particles, where no pattern ever achieved sufficient complexity to reflect on its own existence, here is something that has achieved exactly that. Here is a pattern of matter and energy so exquisitely organized that it can be aware of itself, can ask what it is, can wonder about its own nature, can feel the soft pull of sleep and the gentle warmth of a blanket, and the strange and beautiful mystery of being alive in a universe that did not have to contain awareness, but somehow does. This is what is happening right now, and it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. There is a word in Sanskrit, Sat Chit Ananda, that is used in the Hindu tradition to describe the nature of ultimate reality. Sat means being, Chit means consciousness or awareness, Ananda means bliss or joy. And the tradition is saying that being and awareness and joy are not three separate things that happen to be found together. They are three aspects of one and the same reality. That to be, truly to be, is to be aware, and to be truly aware is to be blissful. Not blissful in the sense of a particular pleasant emotion that comes and goes, but blissful in the sense of a quality of intrinsic okayness that is the very nature of awareness itself. This seems counterintuitive to most of us. We are familiar with awareness that is accompanied by suffering. We are familiar with being that is accompanied by pain. We know what it feels like to be acutely and painfully conscious. How can consciousness itself be inherently blissful? But the tradition is pointing to something specific, not the awareness that is contracted around a particular difficult experience and identified with it and struggling against it, but the awareness that holds that experience, the way the sky holds a storm, the awareness that is prior to and larger than any particular content, the awareness that is not diminished by the arising of a difficult thought, any more than the sky is diminished by the arising of a dark cloud. That awareness, the awareness that is your most fundamental nature, the awareness from which the contracted, suffering, identified awareness is a kind of temporary narrowing. That awareness is in its intrinsic nature something that the tradition can only call blissful, not as an emotion, but as a quality, the quality of being completely itself,
the quality of being completely here, the quality of simply and utterly being, without needing to be anything other than what it is. And as sleep approaches, as the thinking mind begins to grow quieter, as the sharp edges of the day's concerns begin to soften and blur, as the sense of separate self begins to lose its hard definition and become something more fluid, more diffuse, more like a pattern in mist than a shape in stone, this quality becomes more accessible. Not because you are achieving something or attaining something, but because you are, for the moment, not doing the thing that normally obscures it. You are not maintaining the story. You are not defending the boundary. You are not managing the presentation. You are simply here, simply aware, simply the open space in which the softening and the blurring and the dissolving are happening. And in this space, perhaps something can be seen that is not usually visible in the middle of the day when everything is sharp and loud and urgent. Perhaps the extraordinary can be recognized in the ordinary. Perhaps the infinite can be glimpsed in the finite. Perhaps what you are can, for a moment, shine through what you seem to be. Not because you have done something special, not because you have earned it or deserved it or prepared for it, but simply because this is what happens when the noise gets quiet enough.
When the clouds thin and the sky can be seen not somewhere behind them, but as the very fabric in which they appear. Alan Watts was not, ultimately, a teacher of doctrine. He was a teacher of seeing. What he wanted more than anything was for the people who heard him to see for themselves, not to accept his descriptions, not to adopt his philosophical framework, not to believe what he told them, but to look, to actually look, to turn attention toward the one who is looking and discover what is there, or what is not there, or what is there but is not what was expected. And in that looking, that genuine and unpresuming and curious looking, to find something that could not have been told or taught or transmitted, something that can only be found by looking. He was fond of quoting a line from the Islamic tradition. If you think that you understand God, what you understand is not God. The divine cannot be caught in a concept. The ultimate cannot be captured in a definition. And by extension, what you most fundamentally are cannot be captured in a definition either. You are not your name. You are not your history. You are not your personality. You are not your beliefs. You are not even the sense of being a person, though that sense is a real and important part of your experience. What you are, at the deepest level, is the knowing in which all of that appears, the awareness in which all of that arises and persists for a while and eventually dissolves. And that awareness is not yours in the sense of being your possession. It is you. But it is also the same awareness that is looking through every other pair of eyes in this universe, experiencing itself from every other perspective, discovering itself in every other form. You are not a passenger in the universe. You are not an accident of the universe. You are not a visitor to the universe. You are the universe. One of the universe's ways of being and knowing and experiencing and wondering. And that is not a small thing to be. That is perhaps the greatest thing that can be. That is the thing that every story and every song and every prayer and every poem has ever tried to say. in its own way, in its own language, pointing toward the same mystery from a different angle. You are here. The universe is here. And they are the same thing. And in this moment, as sleep approaches and the mind grows soft and the self grows light, you can, if you are willing, simply rest in that. Simply be that. Simply know that. Without trying to hold it, without trying to prove it, without trying to describe it or justify it or turn it into anything other than what it is. Just this, just here, just now. Just the quiet miracle of awareness, aware of itself, in the vast and gentle dark of the night. There is something I want to say about fear, because fear is one of the great themes of the human story, and it is deeply intertwined with the sense of separation that we have been exploring tonight. The fear of death is perhaps the most fundamental of all human fears. The fear that I will cease, that this aware presence, this experience of being here, will one day simply stop. That there will be a last breath, a last thought, a last moment of awareness, and then nothing. The darkness not of sleep, but of permanent and total absence. This fear runs very deep in most human beings. It drives an enormous amount of behavior that on the surface seems to have nothing to do with death. The accumulation of wealth beyond any need, the desperate seeking of fame and recognition, the need to leave a legacy, to be remembered, to matter. All of these, in some sense, are strategies for dealing with the terror of annihilation, with the awareness that this particular pattern called, I will not last. But here is the thing. The fear of death is based on a particular assumption about what you are. It is based on the assumption that you are the pattern, the individual pattern of memories and preferences and personality that constitutes what you normally call yourself. And if that is all you are, then yes, the ending of that pattern is the ending of you, and the fear is understandable. But if you are also, or more fundamentally, the awareness in which that pattern appears, the ground from which the pattern arises and to which it will return, then the ending of the pattern is not the ending of you, any more than the ending of a wave is the ending of the ocean. The wave subsides, the ocean remains, and gathers itself and rises again in a new wave, in a new form, carrying none of the previous wave's specific character, but expressing the same fundamental ocean nature. Now, I am not claiming that I or anyone else can know with certainty what happens to awareness after the death of the body that it has been associated with. The honest answer is that no one knows. The great traditions have their different visions and promises and teachings about what comes after. Science has its tentative suggestions and its honest agnosticism about what it cannot measure. And somewhere in the middle, with remarkable and sometimes beautiful humility, the mystics of all traditions essentially say, we do not know exactly what happens. But we know that what you are is not limited to what you think you are, and therefore the ending of what you think you are is not as terrible as you fear. Alan Watts used to deal with this fear by asking a very simple question. What was it like before you were born? Not what you imagine it was like,
What was the quality of your experience before you were born? And of course the answer is that there was no experience. There was no quality of anything. There was simply the absence of this particular perspective. And was that terrible? Was the non-existence before your birth a terrible thing? Most people, when they really consider this, have to admit that it was not.
It was not experienced as terrible because there was no one there to experience it as anything. And therefore, Watts would say, why should the non-existence after your death be any different? Why should it be terrible? For whom will it be terrible? Not for you, because you will not be there to experience it as terrible. For the people you leave behind, yes, that is a genuine grief, a genuine loss, a genuine wound in the fabric of the relationships that made your life meaningful. But for you, the great non-experience of non-existence is no more terrible than the great non-experience of the time before you were born. And in the meantime, between these two eternities of non-experience, there is this extraordinary, improbable, unrepeatable adventure of being alive and aware and connected and curious. This brief and blazing comet of experience that is your life. And the question is, are you here for it? Or are you spending it worrying about its ending? There is a meditation practice in the Buddhist tradition called Maranasati, the contemplation of death. Not a morbid dwelling on decay and dissolution, but a regular, intentional remembering of the fact of mortality. The purpose is not to induce fear or depression. The purpose is to do the opposite. By regularly and honestly facing the fact of our own death, we loosen the grip of the unconscious assumption that we will live forever, the assumption that the important thing we want to say can be said later. The important conversation we need to have can happen some other time. The life we really want to live can wait until some future arrangement of circumstances makes it safe and convenient. When death is genuinely faced, not as an abstract fact, but as a living reality, the present moment becomes more precious. The people in your life become more precious. The simple pleasures, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the sound of music, the presence of friends become more vivid, more appreciated, more fully received. Not because of some trick of reframing or some self-help strategy, but because the illusion of unlimited time, the illusion that has been allowing you to be half present and half somewhere else in your mind, has been dissolved. And what remains, when that illusion dissolves, is this. Just this. The only time there is. The only life there is. The only moment that will ever be exactly this. And in this moment, as you lie here on the edge of sleep, that teaching can land in a very particular and beautiful way. Because sleep itself is a small death. Every night the self dissolves. Every night the continuous narrative of your life is interrupted. And every morning, what comes back is something that feels continuous. Something that picks up the thread and says, yes, I am the same person who went to sleep last night. But is it? Is the morning self the same as the evening self? In what sense are they the same? The body has changed. Many of the cells have changed. The thoughts are different. The mood is different. What makes them the same self? Is it memory? Is it continuity of the physical body? Is it something else entirely? These are not merely academic questions. They point toward something important about the nature of personal identity, about the nature of what we call self, about whether the boundaries of the self are as fixed and as certain as they appear to be. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent much of his career examining the question of personal identity, of what makes you the same person over time. And his conclusion, arrived at through careful and rigorous philosophical analysis rather than through mystical experience, was strikingly similar to what the Buddhist and Hindu traditions had been saying for millennia: that the self is not a thing. It is a process. It is not a fixed substance that persists unchanged through time. It is a pattern of continuity that is more like a river than a stone. A river is the same river from day to day, even though the water in it is entirely different. The pattern continues. The specific material expression of the pattern changes constantly. And if this is so, if the self is a pattern rather than a thing, then the question of whether it will survive death becomes a different kind of question. Not whether a thing will persist, but whether a pattern will persist. And patterns can persist in many ways that things cannot. A musical theme can persist across many different performances, many different instruments, many different acoustic environments. The theme is real, even though the specific sounds that carry it are always different. The mathematical structure of the theme persists even when no one is playing it. Is there a sense in which the pattern of what you are might persist beyond the specific physical substrate that currently carries it? I am not asserting that it does. I am only saying that the question is more interesting, more open, more genuinely uncertain than the usual either/or of immortality versus annihilation tends to suggest. And in the meantime, whether or not the pattern persists beyond the body, right now, the pattern is here. Right now, awareness is here. Right now, this extraordinary event of conscious experience is happening. And that is not nothing. That is everything. Everything that can possibly be experienced, or known, or loved, or suffered, or wondered about, can only be experienced from inside this extraordinary miracle of awareness. And you have it, right now, right here, in this quiet, in this darkness, in this gentle settling towards sleep. You have it. Let us spend some time now in the deep waters. Let us follow the thread of consciousness down past the ordinary thoughts and concerns of daily life, past the chatter and the planning and the remembering and the worrying, past even the deeper and more fundamental sense of being a particular person with a particular history, down toward something more basic, more fundamental, more prior. As your body grows heavier and the mind grows quieter, notice that there is still something noticing. There is still awareness present, even as the things that normally fill awareness grow dim and distant. The thoughts are slowing, the concerns are receding. The body is releasing its held tensions one by one. And through all of this release, through all of this softening and dissolving, awareness continues. Not effortfully,
not with any special quality of concentration or vigilance, but simply because awareness is what is here. Awareness is the default condition. It is not something you have to produce. It is what is left when you stop producing everything else. This is perhaps the deepest paradox in all of contemplative teaching, that the thing you are looking for is what is looking, that the awareness you are trying to find is the awareness that is trying, that the self you are trying to know is the knowing itself, and therefore the search is its own answer. The seeking contains the finding. Not in the trivial sense that looking for something means you will eventually find it, but in the more radical sense that the quality of open, curious, unpresuming attention that is genuinely looking for the nature of awareness is itself an expression of the awareness it is looking for. You cannot look at awareness from outside. You can only be awareness looking. And in being awareness looking, you already are what you are looking for. The search and the finding are one movement. There is a quality that you might notice if you are paying attention in a very gentle and relaxed way at the edges of sleep,
a quality that is different from the normal quality of waking consciousness. A loosening of the usual sense of being a definite and located self, a blurring of the edges of personal identity, a quality of openness and spaciousness that is not disorienting, because in this moment of relaxation and approaching sleep, there is nothing to be disoriented about, but which is subtly different from the tight, defined, located sense of self that characterizes ordinary waking experience. This is the hypnagogic state, the state between waking and sleep, the state in which the mind begins to let go of its ordinary mode of operation and enter the more fluid, more associative, more imaginal mode of dream consciousness. And in this state, something becomes visible that is not usually visible. The constructed quality of ordinary experience becomes briefly apparent. The fact that the sharp, defined, solid-seeming world of waking experience is itself a kind of construction, a kind of model built by the mind from raw sensory data, becomes briefly and dimly apparent, not as a frightening destabilization, but as a gentle loosening, a gentle reminder that the world is not as fixed or as solid or as separate from the mind that perceives it as it normally seems. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition has very sophisticated teachings about what happens in the transition from waking to sleep, and in the transitions between dream states and deep sleep, and in the transition from deep sleep back to waking. According to these teachings, each of these transitions is an opportunity to recognize the nature of mind, an opportunity to see that awareness is not bound to the particular state it is currently in, an opportunity to discover that the light of consciousness does not go out in sleep, does not cease to be, does not become nothing, but rather dissolves into its own ground and rests there before arising again in a new form with the morning. And the practice in this tradition is essentially a practice of recognition, not of achieving something new, but of recognizing what has always been the case, of recognizing awareness as awareness in the midst of its various transformations, rather than being wholly identified with and lost in any particular state. This is what the tradition calls being a lucid dreamer of one's own life. Not in the specific technical sense of becoming aware that you are dreaming while inside a dream, though that too is part of it, but in the broader sense of recognizing that all of experience, waking experience as much as dream experience, arises within awareness, is held by awareness, and is not ultimately other than awareness. And in that recognition, even suffering does not have the same quality. Even the most difficult and challenging experience becomes workable, becomes navigable, because it is being held in something that is larger than it. Not in the sense of a container that confines it, but in the sense of a sky that holds a storm. The storm is real. The wind and the rain and the lightning are real, genuinely happening, genuinely powerful. But the sky in which they happen is not diminished by them. The sky is not frightened by the storm, because the sky is not inside the storm. The sky contains the storm. And you are the sky, not the weather, the sky. This is perhaps the most essential thing, the thing toward which all the philosophy and all the story and all the meditation and all the inquiry has been pointing all along. You are the sky, not any particular state of the sky, not the clear blue sky of a happy day, not the dark and stormy sky of a painful one, not the golden sky of a glorious sunset, not the black and star-scattered sky of the night, but the sky itself, the capacity for all weather, the space that holds all of it without being defined by any of it, the open, boundless, unlimited awareness that is not a particular experience, but the ground of all experience. Not a particular feeling, but the space in which all feelings arise and pass. Not a particular self, but the luminous and spacious and utterly ordinary miracle that is the most fundamental fact of your existence. And tonight, as the world grows quiet and sleep draws near, this is where you are, in the sky, of the sky, as the sky. The thoughts that arise are weather. The feelings that arise are weather. The sounds that come to you from the world outside are weather. The sense of a body growing heavy and still is weather. And you, the awareness in which all of this is happening, the knowing that knows all of this without being any of this, you are the sky, not doing anything, not achieving anything, not even watching anything in the sense of a watcher separate from what is watched, but simply being the open, luminous, utterly present, utterly ordinary, utterly extraordinary ground of all of it. Let the thoughts come. Let them drift through the open sky of awareness like clouds, not pushing them away, not pulling them close, just letting them come and letting them go. Let the sounds of the world come, the distant hum of the night, the small sounds of the settling house, the soft sound of your own breathing. Let all of it come and let all of it go, arising in awareness and dissolving in awareness, like waves in the ocean, like music in the air, like light in a room. And notice that none of this coming and going disturbs the ground. None of it diminishes the awareness in which it arises. The waves do not diminish the ocean. The music does not diminish the air. The light does not diminish the space in which it shines. And the thoughts and sensations and sounds of your experience do not diminish the awareness in which they appear. They are its expression. They are its play. They are the universe discovering itself through the medium of your particular, unrepeatable, extraordinary experience of being alive. And in this moment, in this quiet, in this approaching sleep, the universe is doing something remarkable. It is coming to rest in itself, through you, as you, with you. The great restlessness of conscious life, the constant seeking and striving and questioning and achieving, is pausing. And in the pause, something can be felt that is always present but almost never noticed. The deep, deep peace of simply being. Not the peace of having resolved all the questions, not the peace of having achieved all the goals, not the peace of a problem solved or a burden lifted, but the peace of the ground itself, the peace of the sky, the peace of the ocean in its depths, undisturbed, undisturbable, already here, already whole, already everything it needs to be. Alan Watts closed many of his talks with a quality of gentleness and warmth that was characteristic of his teaching at its best. Not the performer's warmth, not the warmth of someone who needed to be liked, but the warmth of someone who had genuinely seen something true and beautiful and wanted to share it. He would often say something to the effect of, "The secret is that there is no secret. The truth you have been looking for has been standing in the light of day all along. It is the most obvious thing in the world, so obvious that generations of seeking have consistently looked right past it. It is this, just this, the fact of being, the fact of awareness, the fact that right now, in this moment, something is here. And when this lands, when you feel it rather than just think it, there is a quality to it that I can only call grace. Not grace in the religious sense of divine favor, but grace in the sense of ease, of rightness, of things being as they are supposed to be, of the universe having arranged itself through billions of years of extraordinarily improbable creativity to arrive at this moment, this exact moment, you here, awareness here, this quiet and this darkness and this gentle passage toward sleep. All of it part of the same extraordinary and ongoing creativity of the cosmos. All of it right, all of it enough, all of it in the deepest possible sense, home. The stars are out tonight, somewhere above the clouds, or visible through the window if the sky is clear where you are. The stars are burning in their ancient and unreachable distances, each one a sun, many of them circled by worlds, some of those worlds perhaps circled by moons, some of those worlds perhaps carrying, in their seas or their soils, the beginnings of something that will one day think about the universe that made it,
something that will one day lie in the quiet of the night, feeling the weight of a body at rest, listening to words about the nature of existence, and begin to sense, perhaps, the faintest edge of something that cannot be said, but that can be felt, the faintest edge of the recognition that has always been waiting, just below the surface, just past the edge of the ordinary, just beyond the thought that was about to arise. The universe is vast beyond imagination. The timescales of its existence make the entire span of human history look like the blink of an eye. The scales of its structures, from the quarks inside protons to the superclusters of galaxies that form the cosmic web, span magnitudes that the human mind cannot truly comprehend. And in this vastness, on a small rock in an unremarkable solar system, in one of billions of galaxies, something has arranged itself with such extraordinary precision and such extraordinary luck that awareness has arisen, that experience is happening, that something knows it is here. And that is not a small thing.
That is perhaps the most astonishing and precious and improbable thing in the entire universe. That is what you are. An improbable and precious and utterly extraordinary point of awareness in the cosmos. A place where the universe has achieved the impossible, knowing itself. And now, as sleep draws very close, as the boundary between waking and dreaming grows thin and permeable, as the self begins to soften and dissolve back into the larger ocean from which it arose, hold this lightly. Hold it the way the sky holds the stars, without gripping, without effort, without needing it to be anything other than what it is. Simply let it be true. Let the universe be vast, and you be small, and the two of you be the same thing. Let the cosmos be ancient, and your life be brief, and the two of you be the same thing. Let awareness be infinite, and your thoughts be finite, and the two of you be the same thing. Just for this moment, just here, just this. The breath is slowing, the body is settling, the mind is growing quiet. The day is truly over now. The concerns and the plans and the memories and the unfinished stories of your waking life are receding like a tide going out, leaving the shore clean and still and empty in the way that is not absence, but openness. The vast openness of the ocean, the vast openness of the night sky, the vast openness of awareness itself. All of these are the same openness, all pointing toward the same quality of undivided, unconstrained, undisturbable being. And this being is what you are going to rest in now, not as a destination you are traveling to, not as an achievement you are working toward, but as the nature of what you already are, which you are now, in this softening and dissolving, beginning to feel. The held becomes unhelding, the tight becomes loose, the small becomes large, the separate becomes whole. Not through any effort of your own, but through the simple and extraordinary grace of allowing what is already the case to be what it is. The words are slowing now. The thoughts between the words are growing longer, more spacious, more full of the quality of the sky on a clear night. And in those spaces between the thoughts, in those gaps in the constant stream of mental activity, something is there that is not a thought, and not a feeling, and not a sensation, and not any content of experience at all. Something that is simply the aware quality of awareness itself, tasting its own nature, resting in its own ground, being, simply and utterly and completely, itself. You are that. In the depths of sleep, you will be that. When the dreams arise, you will be that in which the dreams arise. When the dreams dissolve and the deep sleep of no experience comes, you will be that which is present even in the absence of experience. And when the morning comes, and the self assembles itself again, and the day begins, and the world resumes its friendly and demanding presence, you will be that through which all of that is known and lived and experienced. You are that. You have always been that. Welcome home. Not to a place, not to a state, not to an achievement, but to what you have never left, the deepest home, the home that precedes all other homes, the home that will survive all other endings, the home that is not a location, but a nature, the home that is being itself, awareness itself, here itself, now itself, this. And now the words can fall away, and now the thoughts can fall away, and now even the awareness of the awareness can grow soft and diffuse and merge with the vast and gentle darkness of the night. And what remains, after everything else has gone, is not nothing. It is everything. It is the ground, the sky, the ocean, the silence, the presence, the peace, the mystery, the home, the love that is not a feeling, but the very substance of being, the light that illuminates all things from within, the truth that does not need to be said because it is more fundamental than any saying, the peace that passes understanding because it is the ground of all understanding, the you that is not you and is all of you and is everything there is. Resting now, being now, home now, here. Now sleep can come. It has always been coming. It has always been close. It has always been the next moment of the same great journey. The journey that has no destination because it is the destination. The journey that goes nowhere because it is always already home. Sleep now, and in sleep, as in waking, as in dreaming, as in all the states and transitions of this miraculous adventure of being conscious in the cosmos, you are held. You are held in the vast and gentle arms of the universe that made you, and is you, and loves you, with the only love that never ends, because it is the ground of all loving. Sleep. You are safe. You are home. You are, in the deepest and most literal and most beautiful sense of the word, whole. The stars are burning. The ocean is breathing. The earth is turning slowly in the great dark. And somewhere in all of that immensity, in a room, in a body, in the soft and borderless country that lies between waking and sleep, something is resting in its own nature. Something is returning to the source. Something is remembering what it always was. And the universe, through that something, through you, is doing what it does in every moment of awareness that has ever occurred in any corner of this cosmos. It is discovering itself. It is loving itself. It is marveling at the miracle of its own existence. And in your stillness, in your surrendering, in your passage into the deep and nourishing dark of sleep, the universe is resting, as you rest, in you, as you. The dream is ending, the deeper truth is beginning. Close your eyes, let go. Let the mystery have you. It always already has.
And it is good. It is more than good. It is everything. It is home. Good night.